Born into a world where heroes are destined, not created, Ein is burdened with a cursed ability that marks him as weak and insignificant in the eyes of everyone around him. Rejected and scorned by society, he's unexpectedly granted a rare second chance at life, and with this opportunity, Ein resolves to embark on a path of redemption, determined to prove that even someone like him can rise to the ranks of a true hero. This story begins with Ein, injured and broken, standing at the edge of a cliff. Blaming himself for being too weak, he finds relief in knowing that this will finally be the end. Ein throws himself off the edge, questioning if his life ever had meaning. As the wind rushes past him, he reflects on his failures, lamenting how he was never able to accomplish anything. In his last moments, he reflects on the cruel way he was treated, convinced that his life was the worst. People saw him as nothing more than garbage, and now he will die as they always thought of him, like trash. A while earlier, we see a warrior battling a giant rat monster. He fights skillfully, but grows impatient as his mage partner takes her time completing an incantation. But when she finally casts her fireball, it obliterates the beast in a fiery display. With the fight over, the warrior smugly calls for their team's trash picker, who turns out to be Ein. Trying to maintain some dignity, Ein insists his name isn't trash picker, but he trips, drawing ridicule from his teammates. And the mage sneers that they should pity him instead because he isn't high common class like they are, and instead she cruelly labels him as low common garbage. Ein apologizes for stumbling, blaming the load he's carrying, but Zoid the warrior snaps at him to hurry up and appraise the beast. In this world, Ein's occupation is the low common appraiser, a position at the very bottom of society's hierarchy. Here the goddess of light assigns jobs at birth, while the goddess of darkness grants skills. Skills can be honed through training, but jobs are inherited and unchangeable, passed down through families for generations. Jobs fall into 3 tiers. At the top is the rare tier, reserved for exceptionally talented individuals like military strategists and wealthy merchants. The middle tier, which is highly common, includes fighters like swordsmen and mages, as well as people like Ein's teammates Zoid and Jolene. At the bottom lies the low common tier, which consists of peasants, laborers, and appraisers deemed unfit for combat. Children usually inherit their parents' jobs, but Ein lost his parents early on and couldn't follow in their footsteps. So with no family trade to carry on, he chose to become an adventurer, dreaming of wealth and success. However, reality crushed those dreams, leaving him stuck in a role no one respects. Using his appraisal skill, Ein examines the giant rat, finding it has an F rating for rarity, the lowest possible rank. However, its incisors are rated D, making them slightly more valuable. Struggling to pull out the tooth, Ein asks Zoid for assistance. Insulted by the very idea, Zoid declares he'd never touch a filthy rat, and Jolene chimes in to remind Ein that dealing with trash is the trash picker's job. Zoid grows increasingly irritated with Ein, pelting him with a rock when he dares to glare back. The frustration boils over as Zoid kicks Ein to the ground, asserting his dominance. Jolene then coldly lectures Ein, saying he should be more grateful since they're the ones protecting him. Left with no choice, Ein swallows his pride and apologizes, knowing full well that fairness doesn't exist in this world. As Ein continues appraising the rat, his teammates mock him relentlessly. Jolene sneers at the disgusting task, unable to hide her disdain as Ein reaches into the rat's mouth to retrieve the incisor. Ein can only agree with them, knowing that his sole value lies in carving materials from monsters, and it's a job that feels no better than digging through garbage. Zoid, never missing a chance to belittle him, mocks that Ein is only in the party because Zoid refuses to dirty his magic bag with disgusting monster parts. The dude taunts him, calling him trash picker boy, and orders him to hurry up so they can move on. Powerless to resist, Ein obeys, enduring the humiliation because survival demands it, and for someone like him, picking through filth is the only path to staying alive. That not long after, Zoid spots the corpse of a hellhound and can barely contain his excitement. Wasting no time, he sends Ein to harvest his parts. But Ein hesitates because guild intel stated that hellhounds shouldn't even be in this dungeon. But Zoid, as usual, dismisses Ein's concerns, barking at him to stop thinking and start working. And then the two start laughing and fantasizing about how much money they'll make from the loot. Ein then reluctantly appraises the hellhound, discovering that its parts have a B rarity, and begins dismantling it. But before he can finish, Zoid notices another hellhound nearby and gleefully demands Ein handle that one too. But this time, Ein freezes in fear because his instincts tell him something is horribly wrong. According to the guild map, there should only be a single corridor here, yet reality contradicts it. But Zoid waves him off, claiming the map must simply be incorrect. Ein insists it's a bad omen, and he urges the group to leave, but Zoid snaps, telling Ein to leave if he's so scared. Tired of what he calls backtalk, Zoid threatens to fire Ein on the spot, and he ups the stakes by declaring that if Ein doesn't follow orders, he won't even pay him for the work he's already done. And he tells him that this is his last chance to change his damn mind. Trapped in a no-win situation, Ein has no choice but to comply because his low-tier job makes him an undesirable teammate, and finding another party willing to take him in would be nearly impossible. And as much as he despises Zoid and Jolene, sticking with them is his only option for survival. Filled with fury and frustration, Ein swallows his pride once again, painfully aware of the harsh truth that life for him will never be fair. A while later, Zoid is ecstatic when they stumble upon a pile of slain hellhounds. Ein, however, is deeply worried, questioning what could have taken down such high-level monsters. If it had been adventurers, they would have collected the valuable items. Zoid, uninterested in thinking too hard, dismisses the concern, but Ein is horrified when he notices several living hellhounds nearby. The two jerks finally realize the danger they're in, and Ein deduces the pack was likely fighting over food. Jolene panics and admits that they couldn't defeat even one of these beasts, so they decide to flee. But escape seems impossible, and Zoid hatches a sinister plan. With malice in his eyes, he orders Jolene to cast a paralyzed spell on Ein. Ein is horrified, pleading with her, but Jolene reluctantly agrees, apologizing as she explains she isn't ready to die yet. She casts the spell, immobilizing Ein, and then says if he's lucky, the paralysis might wear off in time for him to escape. Zoid, showing no remorse, slams his foot onto Ein and cruelly declares to the pack that dinner is served. So Ein is helpless and can only watch in terror as they abandon him. His faint pleas for help go unanswered, and the pack descends, tearing into him. The excruciating pain breaks the paralysis, allowing Ein to defend himself. In desperation, he tosses his bag, spilling apples that distract the beasts long enough for him to escape. Limping as fast as his battered body allows, Ein is horrified to discover his treacherous teammates have blocked the exit. Realizing he's been trapped, he spots another corridor and takes it only to find it leads to a dead end. Behind him, the growls of the hellhounds grow louder, so Ein is left with two impossible choices: leap off the cliff or be torn apart. In that moment, Ein bitterly laughs, blaming his birth as a lowly appraiser for his miserable fate. He became an adventurer hoping to change his life, but all he found was mockery and betrayal. Despite bowing to the mockers, he was still abandoned. He blames his appraisal skill for his plight, but starts to wonder if it's truly at fault or if the world itself is to blame. Just then, in a rare moment of clarity, Ein realizes the harsh truth. He is the one to blame. He spent his life blaming his job, his circumstances, and everyone else while running away and placing limits on himself. Unfortunately, it's too late, but Ein has realized that his weakness is his own fault. Ein then takes the plunge, echoing his earlier words. He was treated like garbage, and now he will die like trash. Moments later, Ein wakes in an unfamiliar place, his unconscious body having been transported elsewhere, as a mysterious woman approaches him and gently kisses his forehead. When he stirs awake, he is stunned to find himself alive, with all his injuries somehow healed. Rising to his feet, he notices an enormous tree nearby, surrounded by towering walls of water. So he gets intrigued and uses his appraisal skill on a droplet fallen from the tree. The results leave him speechless because it's a droplet from the world tree. Appraising the tree itself, he confirms it is indeed the legendary world tree, a revelation that stuns him because he had always thought it was nothing more than a myth. The legend speaks of a time when the world had a single world tree. It provided the mana people breathe in from the atmosphere and convert within their bodies to use magic. Supposedly, the world tree withered away long ago, leaving scholars puzzled as to how mana still exists. Some theorize the existence of other world trees, but despite exhaustive exploration above ground, none were ever found. It makes sense now. No one ever thought to look so deep in an obscure dungeon. Ein concludes that the tree must have saved his life. Bowing his head, he sincerely thanks it, but just then he hears a faint voice nearby. Looking around, he finds no one and decides to ignore it. He's also surprised by the absence of monsters in the area. Faced with the uncertainty of his situation, Ein begins to ponder his next move. He knows his treacherous teammates won't send for help, and with no food or supplies, he has few options. Determined to survive, Ein resolves to move forward. With one last look, he thanks the world tree again before continuing into the unknown. As Ein moves forward, the mysterious girl from before appears, watching him with concern. This is clearly uncharted territory, as none of it matches the guild map. Ein grows increasingly anxious, fearing that monsters even stronger than the hellhounds might lurk nearby, because those monsters messed him up pretty well. But despite his fears, he gathers himself, determined to push forward. His near-death experience has changed him, and he vows to never again place limits on himself. Armed with nothing but a rock, Ein cautiously navigates the dungeon. To his surprise, he encounters no monsters, a relief that allows him to focus solely on finding an exit. But the nightmare is far from over because out of nowhere, something chops off Ein's ear. The pain is excruciating as he scrambles to recover it, but before he can, his fingers are severed by another attack. Ein panically uses his appraisal skill on his attacker and is horrified to discover it's an S-rank gremlin. The creature strikes again, tearing into him, and Ein is painfully reminded that knowing an opponent's rank doesn't make him strong enough to fight it. Ein then desperately tries to flee, but the gremlin overwhelms him. Just as it moves in for the kill, it suddenly freezes, trembling in fear. Ein watches in disbelief as the gremlin is crushed, and his horror deepens when he sees the cause, an S-rank death bear. The colossal beast wastes no time clawing through Ein's face and destroying one of his eyes. As the bear begins to crush him, Ein resigns himself to death. But just before the end, a mysterious boy appears, intervening to save him. The boy, clearly irritated, mutters about being begged by a girl to help Ein. He makes it clear he's not doing it out of kindness, and tells Ein not to get the wrong idea. Ein's strength fades and he loses consciousness, and when he awakens, Ein is back by the world tree. He then gets stunned and realizes his ruined eye has been replaced, and all of his injuries have been healed once again. Then as he sits up, he finally sees the mysterious girl who's been watching over him. Her beauty leaves him speechless, to the point that he compares her to the elves from fairy tales, while she offers him a gentle smile. Ein struggles to make sense of what's happening when a woman appears behind him and demands that he show proper gratitude and drink the tea Yuri made for him. Ein confusedly looks around and finally notices Yuri holding a cup of tea, offering it with a shy smile. Ein hesitates, suspicious of what the tea might contain, but before he can object, the woman Ursula forces it down his throat. To his surprise, the tea tastes incredible, so Ein compliments Yuri, who beams with happiness, and he finds her even cuter when she's smiling like that. However, Ursula warns him with a deadly glare that she'll erase his entire existence if he dares have a single inappropriate thought about Yuri. Ein quickly nods, taking the threat very seriously. Moving on, Ein asks if it was the two of them who saved him from the death bear. Ursula scoffs, saying she has no interest in protecting a smelly human like him, but Yuri had begged her to step in, leaving her no choice. Ein feels grateful and thanks Yuri for caring about him. Yuri blushes in embarrassment, but her moment of shyness is short-lived as Ursula misinterprets his tone as flirting. So she delivers a swift dropkick to his face, following it up by stomping on him while accusing him of hitting on her daughter. As Ein recovers, he's shocked to learn that Ursula is Yuri's mother. Ursula corrects him, explaining that she's actually Yuri's guardian, a role she's fulfilled since Yuri first planted her roots in this forest. Yuri may appear human, but she's actually the spirit of this world tree, one of 9 that exists in the world. So Ursula's duty is to protect Yuri from any threats. Ein is amazed to learn that Yuri is the world tree's spirit, but it clicks for him since he finds her so beautiful. Unfortunately, the compliment embarrasses Yuri again, prompting Ursula to kick Ein back to the ground, accusing him of staring at Yuri with lecherous eyes. Apologizing profusely, Ein tries to move on but suddenly remembers something. He can still see despite having his eyeball torn out by the death bear. Ursula explains that she healed him using the tears of the world tree, which have remarkable healing properties. However, even the tears couldn't regenerate his crushed eyeball. Instead, Yuri selflessly offered a part of the world tree to create a new eye for Ein, allowing him to see again. Ein expresses his deep gratitude once more, but curiosity gets the better of him. He asks Yuri why she was so concerned about him when they barely know each other. Yuri explains that it's because he thanked her when he fell into this place. While it's rare for people to end up here, a handful of incidents have occurred where individuals fell to their doom. Yuri always saved them, but none ever thanked her. Instead, as soon as those people realized she was the world tree, they selfishly exploited her, collecting her water and tearing off her branches and leaves to sell for profit. Ein, however, was the first person to treat her with genuine respect, which made her take a liking to him. Despite her fondness for Ein, Ursula interjects, reminding them that he isn't supposed to be here and insisting he leave immediately. Yuri pleads with Ursula not to send Ein back into the dungeon, knowing he'd surely die. Ursula, however, remains indifferent, saying that what happens to Ein is none of her concern. Yuri, desperate to save him, begs Ursula to find a way to guarantee his safe return. Unfortunately, Ursula explains her hands are tied. As the world tree's guardian, she cannot stray too far from Yuri, and she also notes that teleportation magic doesn't work in this dungeon. Devastated by the lack of options, Yuri begins to cry. Seeing her tears, Ursula finally relents and comes up with an alternative. She declares that she will personally train Ein until he's strong enough to make it out of the dungeon on his own. Yuri, relieved and grateful, thanks Ursula for agreeing to help. Ein, overwhelmed by gratitude and joy, hugs both of them tightly. However, Ursula quickly pushes him away, irritated by the affection. Pulling herself together, Ursula warns Ein that her training will be hellish, the kind only one of the world's greatest sages can deliver. And she makes it clear that she won't tolerate laziness or half-hearted efforts, so Ein nods solemnly, swearing to give his all. When Ursula leaves him outside to begin training, Ein starts to feel uneasy. As she walks away to prepare, he nervously wonders if her idea of training might involve throwing him straight into battle with monsters by himself. Just then, Ursula informs Ein that she expects him to fight monsters on his own as it's the quickest way for him to learn. For his first task, she points out a gremlin in the distance and tells him to start there, but the problem is that Ein can't see anything. Ursula reminds him that his left eye was replaced with a piece of the world tree, urging him to try using it. Still, even with his spirit eye, Ein sees nothing but darkness. So Ursula explains that Ein lacks the awareness to fully utilize the spirit eye's potential. Reflecting on how he lost his original eye and how Yuri helped restore it, Ein focuses deeply. And when he opens his eyes again, the world looks brighter and clearer than ever before, so now he can finally see the gremlin lurking far ahead. So Ursula announces it's time to begin training, and without warning, she throws a rock at the gremlin, provoking it into charging toward them, and tells Ein his first task is to dodge its high-speed attacks. Ein panics, saying it's impossible because the gremlin is too fast for him to follow. Ursula dismisses his complaints, telling him to use his appraisal skill to analyze its movements. Skeptical, Ein reluctantly tries it out, and to his amazement, the appraisal skill highlights the gremlin's attack patterns in real time. However, knowing where the attacks will land is useless if he doesn't actually dodge them. When the gremlin cuts him, Ursula activates a barrier to halt the battle. She then pulls out a vial of tree drops borrowed from Yuri, pouring on Ein's severed ear. After it reattaches, she warns him to take this seriously, as repeated injuries will only prolong his suffering. With the barrier down, the gremlin resumes its assault, but this time, Ein ducks just in time to avoid its attack. After a week of grueling training, Ein has finally learned to anticipate the gremlin's movements and dodge its attacks every time. Proud of his progress, Ein announces to Ursula that he's completely mastered the technique. However, his confidence makes him careless because the gremlin sneaks behind him and slashes his back, catching him off guard. Laughing at his pain, Ursula erects another shield around them so they can take a break. Though she thoroughly enjoys seeing him in pain, she admits that he has done well and tells him that he's passed the first test. Now it's time for the next lesson, and Ursula informs Ein that he has to defeat the gremlin. Ein is willing to try, but he's quick to point out that without a combat job, killing an S-rank monster is impossible for him. Ursula anticipated this and explains that while it would indeed be impossible with his bare hands, he won't have to rely on them, and she reveals that she crafted a special sword for him. Ursula adds that she didn't want to make the sword herself, but Yuri went through the effort of snapping off one of her branches to provide the materials, all because she wanted to help him. Ein is deeply moved that Yuri would endure such pain for his sake. Swearing to make good use of the sword, he thanks her sincerely. With that, Ursula drops the barrier and leaves Ein to face the gremlin alone. He charges at the creature, but it effortlessly dodges his initial swing. Ursula is unimpressed and teases him by saying that he'll never hit the gremlin if he keeps swinging so slowly. Ein knows she's right and tries a new tactic, predicting the gremlin's path and timing his attack for when it gets close. However, the gremlin easily jumps over his blade, proving it's smart enough to avoid predictable moves. Realizing he needs a better strategy, Ein decides to take his appraisal skill further. Instead of simply predicting the gremlin's movements, he focuses on analyzing every detail of its attack. He digs deep, activating what he calls a super appraisal as the gremlin charges at him. And suddenly the creature seems frozen in time, but in reality, Ein's spirit eye is appraising its movements so quickly that it feels like slow motion. With such a clear view of the gremlin's attack, Ein calmly prepares himself and lands a clean hit, whacking it in the face and defeating it. Ein is ecstatic about defeating his first monster, but Ursula cuts his celebration short, reminding him this is only the beginning. For the next phase of training, Ursula tasks Ein with defeating over a dozen more gremlins, and Ein feels confident after his success, so he immediately gets to work. After several grueling hours of battling, Ein finally finishes taking down all the gremlins. Exhausted but proud, he turns to Ursula, expecting well-deserved praise. However, she brushes off his accomplishment, saying that this level of performance should be normal for someone who can harness the power of a world tree. Still, she acknowledges his steady progress and decides he's ready for the next step. Ursula then instructs Ein to appraise the gremlin's ability and make it his own, but Ein gets confused and protests that appraisal only provides information about skills, and it doesn't allow him to learn them. Ursula explains that humans typically learn skills through constant practice, but with his spirit eye, Ein should be able to see not just the information, but also the experience tied to the skill. This allows him to instantly acquire it. Ein then curiously decides to give it a try and appraises the gremlin's high-speed movement ability. And as soon as he does, a massive headache overwhelms him as an enormous amount of information floods his mind. Dropping to his knees in pain, he struggles to endure the overload. But when the headache finally subsides, he realizes that he has successfully acquired the gremlin's skill. And he is in disbelief that he learned the skill too quickly, and to test it out, Ein takes off running down the dungeon hall, amazed at how much faster he's moving than before. But there's a serious problem. His body isn't accustomed to moving at such high speeds, and within seconds, the strain tears every muscle fiber in his body, leaving him crumpled in agony. Ursula calmly catches up to him, pouring some of the World Tree's tear drops on his broken body to heal him. She then explains that if his body can't handle the force of the skill right now, the only solution is to keep practicing until it adapts. She then begins an intense training regimen where Ein repeatedly uses the skill until his muscles tear, and she heals him over and over. This continues until Ein's body finally stops breaking under the strain. His muscles grow stronger, and he can now fully use the skill without hurting himself. Feeling confident, Ein wonders if he might finally be ready to challenge the Death Bear. Ursula scoffs at his overconfidence, warning him that even with his current progress, he'd still get demolished if he tried to face the beast now. Ursula then points out that while Ein's speed and agility have improved, he still lacks the attack power needed to take on stronger foes. So to remedy this, she offers him the opportunity to copy one of her own abilities. Aang gets excited and eagerly asks what her ability is, and Ursula responds by casually blasting him with a fireball. She explains that her skill, Discard Ancient, allows her to cast magic without requiring a chant. Ein is immediately impressed, thinking it's an incredibly powerful skill. He's eager to learn it, but Ursula adds a condition. He must appraise the ability while dodging one of her fireballs because she finds it amusing. Then, as Ursula fires another fireball, he appraises her attack mid-flight, successfully acquiring the Discard Enchant ability. However, he fails to dodge in time and is hit squarely by the fireball, collapsing in agony. Ursula heals him yet again, and Ein begins training to cast magic without incantations. Since Ein doesn't have a magic-oriented class, his mana reserves are pitifully low, and he exhausts his energy after just a few spells. But luckily, the Tears of the World Tree not only heal him, but also replenish his mana, while slightly increasing his magic capacity each time. However, mastering the technique will still take a great deal of practice. Then after 2 weeks of rigorous training, Ein finally achieves a breakthrough. He becomes capable of casting mid-level magic and is even able to unleash over 1,000 fireballs simultaneously. With his enhanced appraisal ability, new skills, and raw power, Ursula decides that Ein is finally ready to face another Death Bear. As Ein prepares to confront the monster, he feels nervous about the fight, but Ursula reassures him, saying that if he applies everything he's learned, the battle will be manageable. Then when the Death Bear charges, its claws swing toward Ein with deadly precision. Using his appraisal, Ein reads its movements and counters the point-blank wing cutter spell. The attack lands directly on the bear, dealing significant damage, though it's not enough to kill it. The bear roars in fury, but Ein doesn't give it a chance to recover. He immediately begins bombarding it with fireballs, one after another, until the beast is finally defeated. As he stands over the fallen monster, Ein is shocked at how easy the fight felt. And for a moment, he wonders if the Death Bear was always this weak. But the truth is that Ein has become incredibly strong. Seeing that Ein now exudes confidence and is capable of taking on powerful monsters, Ursula decides his training is finally complete and tells him to leave the dungeon already. But before departing, Ein heads back to the World Tree to bid farewell to Yuri, and thanks both her and Ursula for helping him become, well, less pathetic. As a parting gift, Ursula hands Ein the remains of the World Tree's spirit core, a green stone similar to the one used to create his prosthetic left eye. With an extra core in hand, Ein could create a backup eye in case of emergencies. However, he hesitates to accept it, feeling confused. If a green stone is part of the World Tree's core, doesn't that mean it's essential to Yuri's existence? Ursula doesn't offer much of an explanation, simply reassuring Ein that Yuri will be fine. She also clarifies that he won't be keeping the stone forever, smugly revealing she's placed a spell on it to ensure the stone will return to her once he's dead. Since Ein is unlikely to ever use the core as intended, Ursula decides to make it useful to him immediately by attaching it to his spirit eye, evolving it into a divine form. When Ein opens his newly upgraded spirit eye, he realizes Yuri is nowhere to be seen. Frantic, he starts calling out her name and searching for her, only for Yuri to reappear moments later, emerging from his now divine eye. Ursula then reveals the truth. She has transplanted the core of the World Tree of Life into Ein's eye. As Yuri is the embodiment of the Tree of Life, she will now reside inside his eye from this point forward. Before Ein can fully grasp that he's been tricked into a lifelong, live-in relationship with Yuri, she happily changes the topic. Cheerfully, Yuri explains how useful she'll be to him now, boasting that she can heal him whenever he wants as many times as needed. And despite the ridiculousness of it all, Ein reluctantly admits that having an all-powerful wafer living in his eyeball isn't entirely a bad deal. However, Ein still checks with Ursula to make sure she's okay with this arrangement, asking if she's truly fine being separated from her precious daughter. Hearing this ridiculous question, Ursula kicks Ein in the face, grinding her foot against his head to make him feel the depth of her irritation. She angrily declares that there's no way she'd leave her precious daughter with a clueless, weak loser like him. The only reason she's allowing Yuri to go is because ever since Yuri was born, she's been lonely, stuck in one place, and never had the chance to make friends. Being the responsible mother she is, Ursula wants Yuri to experience the world through Ain's eyes and live the youthful life she never had. Ain, with all the sincerity he can muster, promises that he'll take good care of Yuri and make sure she's happy. With that, Ursula begrudgingly offers Ain a real parting gift. She casts a crest on his right hand, granting him the ability to store an infinite number of objects in a spatial dimension. Not done yet, she decides to give him a spirit sword, but not before stabbing him in his other eye to vent her lingering annoyance. As Yuri heals his injury, Ursula suddenly shoves a golden stone into his mouth. The stone, known as the Sage Stone, links her consciousness to his second eye. It ensures that Ursula will always be watching, ready to nag him or intervene if things get too suspicious between him and Yuri. It's not exactly the freedom Ain was hoping for, but at least he won't be entirely on his own. Now fully equipped, Ain feels a deep sense of gratitude toward Yuri and vows to repay her for everything she's done for him. In response, Yuri reveals her wish. She wants his help to find her sisters, who are scattered across the continent in other dungeons, hidden as trees of life. With no clear purpose in life before, Ain takes up this mission, ready to travel the world and reunite Yuri with her family. Finally, Ain heads back into the dungeon, and with Ursula, the unwanted commentator, nagging in his ear, he blazes through S-ranked monsters with ease. As if Ain wasn't overpowered enough already, Ursula starts remote controlling his appraisal skill, using it to steal the skills of the S-ranked monsters he defeats. Normally, such intense appraisal would leave Ain with a nasty post-skill headache, but with Yuri the healer constantly by his side, he no longer has to endure the pain, so Ain becomes increasingly grateful for his new partner. Shortly afterward, Ain arrives at the door leading to the final boss's room, the one challenge he must complete to escape the dungeon. Ursula explains that the dungeon boss protects the dungeon's core, and destroying the core will unlock the exit. Though hesitant, Ain takes on the challenge, encouraged by Yuri's unwavering support and her blessings. Opening the door, Ain steps into the chamber, noticing only the glowing green dungeon core in the distance. As he approaches it, a magic circle activates, summoning the dungeon boss, a massive rocky monster that looks more ridiculous than threatening due to its awkward design. Following Ursula's instructions, Ain braces himself as the boss throws a punch, enduring the blow with gritted teeth. Using a stolen skill, he dissolves the boss's hand, but it only grows more aggressive, throwing wild punches as the fight intensifies. Seeing the situation escalate, Ursula tells Ain it's time to use the ultimate magic technique she taught him. She warns him he only has enough power to use it once before collapsing, but reassures him that Yuri will heal him afterward. Ain gathers his energy, forming the glowing orb of light above the boss's head. With all his strength, he hurls the orb down like a meteor, striking the boss with a fiery explosion that leaves nothing but burning rubble in its place. With the boss defeated, Ursula reminds Ain to appraise the golem's remains and the dungeon core. As Ain examines the core, Ursula suddenly appears, reminding him that his spirit eye, powered by the world tree, is far more than a simple appraisal tool. Moments later, Yuri emerges, joining them to admire the crystal. Ursula then reveals that the dungeon core can actually enhance Ain's eye, much to his surprise and excitement. When Ursula asks if he wants the enhancement, Ain eagerly agrees. Without hesitation, Ursula transfers the dungeon core into Ain's spirit eye, causing it to evolve into level 2. Thrilled, Ain marvels at his upgraded power. Seeing his enthusiasm, Ursula advises him to keep hunting dungeon bosses and absorbing their cores to continue enhancing his eye and unlocking its full potential. After that, they all leave the dungeon. As they step out, the door closes behind them. Ain curiously runs back to check if it's permanently sealed. Ursula confirms his suspicion, explaining that the dungeon has likely closed for good now that its core is gone. She also mentions that the hole Ain had fallen into earlier is likely sealed as well. This means no one will be able to access the world tree again. Hearing this, Ain feels relieved knowing he no longer has any business with the dungeon and can return to the surface without regrets. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, Zoid is bragging to a group of adventurers about his ordeal with the Hellhounds. He warns them to never go near the dungeon, spinning a dramatic tale of how Ain heroically sacrificed himself so they could escape. Of course, this is all a lie to cover up the fact that Zoid had used Ain as bait to save his own skin. The gullible adventurers fall for his fabricated story, hanging on to every word. But suddenly, Ain's voice cuts through the air, so Zoid freezes in terror as he turns to see Ain, very much alive and well. So he panickingly demands to know how Ain survived. Ain smugly reveals that he not only lived but also defeated all the monsters in the dungeon. Zoid, in disbelief, tries to deny it, as he always assumed Ein was just a weak loser. Watching Zoid's reaction, the other adventurers begin to doubt his earlier story. So Ein wastes no time exposing the truth, and he tells everyone how Zoid had paralyzed him and left him as bait for the hellhounds. So the adventurers furiously turn on Zoid, beating him senseless for his betrayal. Just as they're about to finish him off, Ein steps in and stops them. Instead of holding a grudge, he thanks Zoid, stating that being abandoned allowed him to meet Yuri and Ursula, who changed his life. With that, Ein walks out of the guild, leaving everyone stunned. The adventurers are in awe, marveling at this newfound, heroic version of Ein they never thought existed. Later, Ein continues to explore dungeons and fight monsters with Yuri and Ursula, further evolving his powers with each victory. With every dungeon core Ursula transfers to his spirit eye, he feels himself growing stronger. Then one day, while traveling through the woods, they hear screams in the distance. Rushing toward the noise, they find a carriage under attack by monsters, so Ein swiftly cuts the creatures down while Yuri and Ursula heal the wounded guards. On the other hand, Ein approaches two frightened people off to the side and checks if they are hurt. The woman, turning to face him, falls head over heels for Ein at first sight and immediately throws herself onto him, calling him her hero. Ein finds the whole thing extremely awkward and turns to the man with her for help, assuming he's her brother. However, the man introduces himself as Jasper, the head of the merchant guild. And to Ein's shock, the woman turns out to be Princess Claudia of the country. Claudia insists on bringing them to her mansion to thank them properly for saving her life. Although Ein feels the credit should go to Yuri and Ursula for healing the guards, Claudia makes sure to thank them as well. After this, she drops the formalities, asking them to just call her Claudia. With that settled, she tries to jump on Ein again, but Yuri steps in, blocking her advance. When Claudia asks why, Yuri reluctantly declares that Ein is her husband. Ein, completely blindsided, wonders when exactly this so-called wedding took place. As if things couldn't get any weirder, Claudia casually states that she doesn't mind being his second wife. While Yuri and Claudia bicker over who gets to claim Ein, Jasper interrupts and requests to have a private discussion with him. But what Jasper says next merely makes Ein choke on his drink because he proposes marriage to Ein as well. Jasper then begins by revealing that he's a member of the Silver Phoenix Trading Company, one of the most prominent in the kingdom. And then he takes Ein to an underground storage room filled with various rare jewels and gemstones that Jasper has collected over the years. He acknowledges that Ein's left eye is a spirit core and proceeds to share an unusual tale about why he's been searching for one. According to Jasper, the World Tree once left the surface and became a secret core used to seal the Demon King. Jasper is clearly obsessed with this story, so in a bizarre twist, he asks Ein again to marry him so he can forever be reflected in Ein's spirit core eye. And his bizarre fixation on the core leaves Ein thoroughly creeped out. Then Ursula surprisingly advises Ein to humor Jasper's requests so they can use his resources to locate hidden dungeons. While the idea of teaming up with Jasper has its merits, Ein settles for proposing a friendship instead. When Ein asks about other dungeons, Jasper seems clueless at first but promises they'll uncover them soon enough, leaving Ein hopeful. Still, being stuck in the friend zone isn't enough for the overly eager Jasper, who clearly wants more. But before things get any more awkward, Yuri, Claudia, and Ursula join them, each vying for Ein's attention. It's painfully clear that everyone in the room seems to want a piece of Ein's sausage, leaving him both overwhelmed and completely out of his depth. The scene then shifts to Ein and his group arriving at a hidden dungeon that Jasper had told them about, hoping to find Yuri's family inside. Yuri looks a little worried, but Ein reassures her that he will make sure she meets them. The scene then shifts to Ein inside the dungeon, where he encounters what appears to be a dead end. Ursula quickly informs him that it isn't actually a dead end because there is a teleportation spell has been cast on the walls, allowing entry into the true dungeon. Understanding this, Ein touches the walls and is instantly teleported inside. He is shocked to find himself in what looks like a dense jungle rather than a traditional dungeon. Ursula then explains that a powerful illusion has altered the internal structure, shaping it into something completely different. Hearing this, Ein starts to wonder if one of Yuri's sisters is responsible, and before he can think further, the voice calls out to them, and it's Yuri's sister named Pina. Yuri steps forward, recognizing the voice, and introduces Pina as her mischievous little sister. Pina, in turn, is surprised to see that Yuri has teamed up with humans. Yuri asks where she is, and Pina responds playfully, telling her she'll be waiting at the end of the dungeon, and she challenges Yuri to come find her. Ein, taken aback by her attitude, questions why she won't simply teleport them to her, considering Yuri has come all this way. However, Pina nonchalantly replies that she can't do that, explaining that they will have to walk the entire way to reach her. Ein acknowledges that this makes sense because teleportation magic is an advanced spell and difficult to use casually. Pina then warns them that the dungeon is filled with deadly traps and powerful monsters, making their journey anything but easy. But despite this, Yuri remains determined to push forward. However, Pina teases her, saying that her boyfriend will probably end up doing all the work anyway, making Yuri flustered. Ain then asks Yuri to stay inside his eye for safety, knowing the dangers ahead. Pina is unimpressed and accuses him of simply trying to act cool, and she confidently declares that he won't be able to make it through her dungeon, claiming that hers is the most difficult of all the hidden dungeons. Still, Ain steps forward without hesitation, assuring her that it won't be a problem. Pina watches him carefully, suspicious of his true intentions regarding her sister, and decides that she will expose his real nature before this is over. Pina then watches closely as Ain walks straight toward a pitfall and smirks, thinking that this will finally embarrass him in front of Yuri. However, before he steps in, Ursula warns him about the trap, and he effortlessly jumps over it, much to Pina's annoyance. Ursula urges him to move forward and clear the dungeon quickly. As they advance, Ain encounters several well-placed traps, but he avoids every single one with ease. Pina becomes increasingly frustrated, watching him effortlessly bypass all the obstacles she carefully designed. Yuri, noticing her sister's irritation, casually mentions that Pina has always enjoyed creating things and entertaining others with them. Ain is unimpressed and remarks that damn traps designed to take lives aren't exactly entertaining. But Pina scoffs, telling him that her dungeon doesn't actually kill anyone because whenever someone's about to die, they are simply teleported out. She then informs him that some powerful monsters are headed his way and warns him to turn back unless he wants to be beaten to a pulp. But Ain refuses to give up. At that moment, an Alron appears in front of him. Ursula identifies it as an S-rank monster capable of producing seeds of all plant species. The monster then immediately releases a cloud of sleek pollen, but to Pina's shock, it has no effect on Ain. He explains that he has complete ailment resistance, meaning status effects are useless against him. Pina is infuriated, calling it unfair, but Ain wastes no time. Using Steel Cutter along with Super Accelerate, he slices through the freaking Ulron in an instant. As he appraises its abilities, he suddenly senses an attack from an unseen enemy. Ursula warns him that something is attacking from the shadows, but since it's using its stealth skill, he can't see it. Pina watches in disbelief as Ain casually talks in the middle of battle, unharmed despite the unseen enemy's assault. She demands to know how he isn't taking any damage, and Ain nonchalantly reveals that he has surprise attack nullification. Annoyed, she accuses him of cheating, but he continues, stating that normal attacks don't work on him either because of his immovable fortress skill. Pina is beyond frustrated now, thinking that this guy is practically invincible, but she remains confident that Ain won't be able to strike back against her silent ants as long as they stay in stealth mode. However, Ursula quickly determines their positions, and Ain crushes them all instantly using Gravity Press. He then appraises their skills, further injuring Pina because he's taking down S-rank monsters so effortlessly. So Ain happily states that having Yuri on his side is like a cheat, causing Pina to turn her anger toward her older sister. But despite her frustration, she refuses to give up. Determined to prove herself, she sends even stronger S-rank monsters at him. But once again, Ain defeats them all with a damn single strike. Ursula then appraises their abilities for him, and Pina starts to wonder if Ain is actually a monster himself. Ain simply tells her that he's just a normal appraiser, but Pina isn't buying it because there's a damn nothing normal about him. Meanwhile, we see that Zoid is also inside the same dungeon. He recalls how he ended up here, blaming his current situation entirely on Ain. After Ain exposed his true nature to everyone, Zoid returned to his usual bar, but the moment he stepped inside, people treated him like trash. He spotted Jolene and tried to talk to her, but she looked at him with nothing but disgust. The guys with her confronted Zoid, asking if it was true that he had paralyzed Ain and used him as bait. Desperate, Zoid revealed that it was actually Jolene who cast the paralyzed spell. However, Jolene immediately played the victim, claiming that Zoid had forced her to do it. Hearing this, the entire bar turned against Zoid, kicking him out and telling him never to return. They made it clear, no one would ever party up with him again. Furious, Zoid clenched his fists, unable to believe what was happening. He thought to himself that anyone in his position would have done the same thing. It wasn't his fault. Ain was the problem. If only Ain had died back then, none of this would have happened. Determined to restore his reputation, Zoid decided there was only one way to redeem himself: solo a high-difficulty monster and prove everyone wrong. Without hesitation, he entered a dungeon, hunting down C-rank monsters. He knew that for a normal adventurer, this would be a tough challenge, but he was confident he could handle it. However, as he explored, something startled him, and in his panic, he placed his hand against a wall near the dead end. The next moment, he was teleported straight into the hidden dungeon. As he took in his surroundings, Zoid realized that this place might be home to incredibly strong monsters, just like those hellhounds. But instead of panicking, he saw an opportunity. If he could defeat some powerful monsters here, he could prove his worth once and for all. With that in mind, he pressed forward, only to immediately fall into a pitfall trap. As he tumbled down, he thought his life was over. But instead of dying, he found himself teleported safely outside the trap. That's when Pina's voice reached him, informing him that in this dungeon, death wasn't an option, and he could challenge it as many times as he wanted. Zoid then re-entered the dungeon repeatedly after finding that he couldn't die inside, but each time he gets teleported out whenever he was on the verge of death. After failing multiple times, he found himself inside again, determined to push forward. As he navigated the treacherous path, he suddenly spotted a giant crocodile lurking ahead. Without hesitation, he drew his sword to fight, but before he could react, the beast lunged at him, injuring his hand instantly. Pina's voice echoed through the dungeon, offering to teleport him out if he wished to surrender. However, Zoid stubbornly refused. As he struggled to keep up, the crocodile closed in, preparing to land a finishing blow. But before it could strike, Ein appeared and killed the monster instantly. Zoid, still in shock, thanked his unknown savior, assuming it must be someone powerful, until he looked up and realized it was Ein, and his gratitude vanished, replaced by immediate frustration. Fuming, Zoid demanded to know what Ein was doing in the dungeon, so Ein casually replied that he was here to conquer it. He then quickly appraised the crocodile's abilities, and Zoid couldn't believe his eyes. A so-called trash picker like Ein had just one shot an S-rank monster. Annoyed, Ein asked Pina to teleport Zoid out, not wanting to waste more time. Pina agreed, but before sending him away, Ein used the World Tree's droplets to heal her wounds. Zoid tried to protest, but before he could say anything, Ein knocked him out cold. Moments later, he was teleported outside, humiliated once again. Afterward, Ein stood before the boss room, ready for the final challenge. Pina then called out to him, acknowledging that he had made it this far without difficulty, but warned that he would never reach her unless he could defeat the boss. Ein speculated that the dungeon would close down after beating it, but Ursula corrected him. As long as the dungeon core remained intact, it wouldn't disappear. Understanding this, Ein stepped inside. The boss room was unlike anything he had expected. It was another dense jungle, completely devoid of any visible enemies. Just then, the ground begins to shake, forcing Ein to take to the air, searching for the boss. Ursula quickly informs him that the ground itself is the boss, and moments later, a giant turtle emerges from beneath. Ein stares at its massive size, thinking that it's far too big. He immediately attacks with fireballs, but nothing happens. Ursula senses a nostalgic mana in the area, but tells Ein to focus on the battle. The turtle then retaliates, launching a massive water ball at him. Ein parries it back, but it has no effect. Frustrated, he wonders how to defeat this thing. He then notices that his attacks are hitting the ground rather than the turtle itself, and something clicks in his mind. Ein lands on the ground, ignoring Ursula's urgent warning to fly back up or risk getting crushed. The turtle then stomps down on him, but he remains unharmed. With a smirk, Ein uses Disball and the illusion shatters, revealing the real boss, a tiny turtle. Ein lifts the small creature, and Ursula realizes that it must be a divine spirit, strong enough to create such a high-level illusion. Even she had been completely fooled, proving its immense power. She then praises Ein, saying he won the fight using his own wits and abilities. Curious, Ein appraises the turtle, and to his shock, it's the child of Genbu, one of the 4 divine beasts of creation. Ursula is startled by the revelation, and Ein asks Pina if he really has to defeat it, but she stubbornly insists that he won't clear the dungeon unless he does. Ein argues that since he broke through the illusion, he has already won and refuses to harm the tiny creature. Pina continues to resist, but Ein plays the sympathy card, and after some hesitation, she finally gives in. Ein and the others then step into the chamber where the World Tree stands, and the moment Pina sees Yuri, she throws herself into her sister's arms. The two embrace, happy to be reunited after so long. After a moment, Pina glances at Ein and points at him accusingly, saying that he was the one who bullied her. Yuri quickly defends Ein, telling her sister that he isn't a bad person. Pina eyes Yuri suspiciously, sensing something in her tone, and with a teasing grin, she remarks that it sounds like Yuri has a crush on him. Yuri's face instantly turns red, flustered by the accusation, and thinks that Pina hasn't changed at all. Still as playful as ever, but she's relieved that her little sister is as lively as always. Ein, watching them, smiles, glad to see them reunited and happy. Then Pina suddenly announces that she wants to leave with them, saying she's tired of staying underground. She explains that she can give her spirit core to Ein, just like Yuri did, so he can take her along. Yuri has no objections and asks Ein what he thinks. Seeing no reason to refuse, he agrees. At that moment, the small turtle from earlier begins to glow, and within seconds, it transforms into a girl. She introduces herself as Kuroheim, Pina's guardian, and the daughter of the divine beast Genbu. Ursula's expression changes immediately. Her usual casual attitude disappears, and she addresses Kuroheim with deep respect. Ein is caught off guard, surprised to see Ursula speaking so formally. However, Kurohine waves her hand and tells her to relax. Ursula then tells Ain that before taking Pina, he must ask for Kurohine's approval. Ain does as instructed, and Kurohine grants her permission. She also hands him a sage stone and asks to accompany them, demonstrating her barrier abilities to prove she can be useful. Ain sees no reason to refuse and agrees. Without delay, Ursula begins crafting Pina's spirit core and the sage stone into a prosthetic eye. Once completed, she transplants it into Ian, causing his eye to evolve to level 4, giving him the ability to see through illusion techniques. As he looks around, Ain realizes how much livelier things have become. Seeing Yuri in such high spirits, he feels satisfied. Ursula observing her daughter's happiness thanks Ain for what he has done. However, Ain simply responds that he is only doing what he should. With 6 more siblings to find, he sets his sights on his next goal. Meanwhile, outside the hidden dungeon, Zoid slowly regains consciousness. As his mind clears, he processes what happened and frustration built inside him. He can't believe that Ain, the same person who once picked up trash for him, has become so damn powerful. Afterward, we see Jasper escorting Ain to the local adventurers guild since Ain needed to sell some dungeon loot, and having Jasper by his side would smooth the process. Jasper was widely recognized as a fabulously wealthy merchant, yet Ain remained an enigma to everyone. Jasper then confidently informed the receptionist that Ain was there to offload some dungeon treasures, and almost immediately, Jasper expressed his intention to purchase the entire collection. Eager to assist, the receptionist requested Ain's guild card. However, when he handed it over, she was stunned to learn that he held only an F-rank appraisal status. This revelation prompted her to adopt a condescending tone, openly doubting that an F-rank appraiser could possibly have vanquished any monsters. Soon, the other guild members joined in the ridicule. Unperturbed, Jasper urged Ain to simply present his items. Ain then unlocked his storage, unveiling a veritable mountain of S-rank monster parts. Despite the evident quality and volume of the loot, the assembled adventurers immediately assumed that Ain must have pilfered everything from someone else. After all, they found it inconceivable that he could have personally defeated so many formidable foes. This dismissive attitude was exactly why Ain had always avoided frequenting the guild. He was constantly scorned for his humble F-rank appraisal status. Yet not everyone was shallow, because the guildmaster Megan emerged from her office and sharply reproached the jeering adventurers for deriding someone they barely knew solely based on his class. Determined to set things right, the receptionist scanned the items with an appraisal device, and to her astonishment, every piece was confirmed as genuine. Jasper further bolstered Ain's reputation by asserting that he could personally vouch for Ain's prowess in taking down those very monsters. Realizing the magnitude of her mistake, the receptionist offered a sincere apology. Megan also apologized on behalf of the guild, promising to give the receptionist a stern talking to later. Despite the immutable fact that one's class is predetermined at birth, Megan found hope in individuals like Ain who refused to be limited by such constraints, and Ain in turn felt grateful to encounter someone who judged him by his abilities rather than his rank. Megan had really grown fond of Ain, so she was sure they'd cross paths again soon. For now, though, she had pressing work to attend to, leaving Ain to wrap up his business. The receptionist then requested that Ain wait in the lounge while she processed his items, but unbeknownst to her, Ain had a mountain of loot still to sell, having single-handedly cleared an entire secret dungeon. Once word spread that Ain had done so, all those who had mocked him began clamoring for details. Overwhelmed by this sudden attention, Ain decided to bolt. A little later, Ain sought refuge in the bath to unwind from all the stress. As he was soaking peacefully, Yuri unexpectedly appeared by his side. It took him a moment to register that she was in the bath with him, and when the realization hit, he completely freaked out, scrambling away in panic. Yuri couldn't understand his abrupt distance, given that they were usually inseparable. Soon after, Pina arrived and started teasing, claiming that Ain had been overcome with lust at the sight of Yuri's naked form, though Ain firmly denied it. Normally, Yuri and Pina wouldn't even be in the men's bath, but Pina reminded him that as spirits, they were exempt from such human customs. She then teased him further, asking if he was shy because he was having pervy thoughts about Yuri. Determined to prove his innocence, Ain maintained steady eye contact with Yuri, until his gaze involuntarily drifted down to her ample curves, rendering his mind momentarily blank. At that very moment, Ursula appeared, clearly displeased with Ain's lingering stare at Yuri's body. She warned him, threatening to eviscerate him with her most potent magic if he dared to lay a finger on Yuri. Yuri, attempting to calm the situation, begged Ursula to stop, insisting that Ain hadn't done anything untoward. However, upon hearing her plea, Ursula suspected that Ain might have already overstepped, and she readied herself to blast him anyway. Sensing the imminent danger, Yuri urgently urged Ain to flee, while Pina couldn't help but watch the whole spectacle with a mischievous smile. Once the commotion finally subsided, Ein emerged from the bath and settled at a table, hoping to avoid any further attempts by Ursula to finish him off. Kuroheim was already there, calm and composed, so they chatted amiably. She remarked on how lively everyone had become, crediting it largely to Pina, who was having more fun than ever. Kuroheim explained that Pina was almost like a daughter to her, having created Pina's spirit core as a guardian, which eventually blossomed into a unique personality. Ein then recalled that aside from Yuri and Pina, he believed there were 6 other tree spirits to be found. However, Kuroheim corrected him, informing him that there are actually 7. Puzzled since he had heard that the original world tree had withered years ago, Ein listened as Kuroheim explained that the spirit core of the first tree echidna still exists, though no one knows her whereabouts. The same mystery shrouded the rest of the tree spirits. Despite the daunting task of tracking them down, Ein remained undeterred, his resolve fueled by his desire to make Yuri happy and reunite her with her family. The very next day, Megan arrived at Jasper's mansion in search of Ein, carrying a special request. When Ein asked why she had sought him out specifically, given that any guild member could have been chosen, she explained that the mission was uniquely tailored for him. She then inquired if he had any knowledge of the behemoth. Unfamiliar with the term, Ein listened as she elaborated that the behemoth was one of the legendary dragons originally summoned by the demon lord Micturian. After Micturian was sealed away, the dragon had retreated into hiding, however, and recently re-emerged and was curiously targeting only merchants passing through the area. Because of this, Megan officially bestowed upon Ein the SS-rank quest of defeating the behemoth, a perilous challenge that might well cost him his life. She even expressed that she would understand if he declined, yet before she could finish, Ein declared his intent to undertake the mission. Without delay, Ein set off into the desert where the behemoth had last been spotted. Ursula carefully appraised its exact location, ensuring she knew precisely where the creature lurked. But before Ein engaged the beast, Ursula cautioned him. The behemoth was capable of absorbing magical attacks, and it could harness the very air to launch assaults powerful enough to slice through space itself. Ein heeds the warning, but since the behemoth can absorb magic, Ein realizes he must rely solely on his sword. Yet before he can even swing that, he needs to wake the beast since it's snoozing deep beneath the sand. He opts to cast a massive fire spell to blast a huge chunk of the ground, forcing the behemoth to surface, and unsurprisingly, it's none too pleased about being disturbed. Throughout its long, undefeated existence, being personally crafted by the demon lord to be ridiculously strong, the behemoth has never known defeat. It has obliterated entire human armies and never once encountered a foe worthy of a challenge, so eventually it simply got bored of fighting. Ein might not seem all that intimidating at first glance, but the behemoth grudgingly admits that Ein wields some pretty potent magic. Still, magic won't cut it against the behemoth. When the beast asks who dares challenge its might, Ein boldly introduces himself as just a regular man set on slaying it. The behemoth, thinking this must be some kind of cosmic joke since a puny human like Ein stands no chance, decides to humor him. It boasts that it was created by the demon lord to be ultimate beast. And if that's the best the demon lord could manage, then the demon lord must have been pretty weak. Furious at Ein's cheeky insult, the behemoth unleashes several Helix bullets at him. But Ein is nimble enough to dodge every single one. Still being an earth dragon, the behemoth reminds Ein that there's no escape when you're in a sea of sand. It stomps the ground, trapping Ein in a suffocating sand pit. Not one to be outdone, Ein activates his acceleration skill to speed past the trap and close the distance. When he gets close enough, he slashes through the behemoth's arm. Realizing that this scrappy human might actually pose a threat, the behemoth switches tactics and dives into the sand. As the behemoth swims unseen beneath the surface, Ein finds himself clueless about where the next attack will come from, and his guard drops for a split second. Seizing the moment, the behemoth bursts upward from beneath him and even goes as far as to swallow Ein whole. Behemoth then laughed heartily, convinced that he had utterly proven his superiority over the foolish challenger Ein. But his celebration was tragically premature because within moments his face exploded in a burst of magical detonation. In a dazed state, the beast had no inkling how such a reversal could occur. As his life ebbed away, Behemoth recognized that he had gravely underestimated Ein's power and with surprising calm accepted his defeat. Before his final breath, the dying creature managed to ask Ein how he had pulled off such a stunning feat. Ein explained that he had observed Behemoth's magic absorption only affected the outer layer of his body. Seizing this opportunity, Ein activated a high-level spell while he was momentarily inside the creature's open maw. When Behemoth inquired how Ein had avoided being caught in the devastating blast, Ein replied that he had simply erected a protective barrier around himself to shield against the explosion. In that final moment, Behemoth realized how arrogance had blinded him through years of effortless victories. Content with having met a worthy opponent, he accepted his fate as his life faded away. Despite feeling a tinge of remorse for the fallen beast, knowing that it had only slain at the behest of the demon lord, Ein understood that in the end the creature was responsible for countless deaths and could not be allowed to live. At that point, Ursula urged him to quickly assess his skills, and soon after the clamor of congratulations rose around him as everyone celebrated his victory. Not long after his triumph, Ein received a summons to the royal palace. While he waited, the princess herself emerged to greet him. She apologized for not visiting him more frequently, even though she was in fact regarded as his second wife. Ein curtly reminded her that they weren't truly married, but she chose to overlook his remark and informed him that her father had requested their meeting. Just then, her father the king arrived. Although his menacing demeanor initially intimidated Ein, the king surprised him by adopting a relaxed, friendly tone and assuring him that formalities were unnecessary. Seated together, the king expressed his heartfelt thanks for the meeting, explaining that he had long desired to meet Ein in person. He mentioned that Megan had informed him of Ein's victory over the ancient dragon Behemoth, and as the ruler of this land, it was his duty to properly reward such a feat. Still, Ein modestly insisted that he required no reward. The king, however, reminded him that Ein had also saved the princess when her carriage was ambushed, and as her father, he felt compelled to offer his gratitude. Ein countered by saying that if anyone deserved thanks, it should be Yuri, since he had become strong only with her help. Moved by his words, the king also extended his thanks to Yuri, though she remained shy and hid behind Ein. The king went on to remark that he had a keen sense for judging character, and he could clearly see that Ein was someone who never let power corrupt him. With pressing matters to attend to, the king concluded their meeting for the day, but not before presenting Ein with a gift, a finely crafted watch bearing the royal crest. This token, he explained, would grant Ein virtually unhindered passage throughout the kingdom. Though Ein hesitated to accept such a valuable item, knowing its potential to help him explore areas normally off-limits in his quest to locate Yuri's family, he ultimately accepted it graciously. News of Ein's defeat of the behemoth began to spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom, and his popularity soared. Meanwhile, Zoid's reputation sank to new depths. Now everyone regarded him as little more than trash. What infuriated Zoid most was that people wouldn't stop talking about Ein's accomplishments, even though not long ago Zoid had been stronger than Ein. He seethed that everything might have been better if Ein had remained a weakling, or better yet, had never existed at all. Just then, a woman's voice interrupted his bitter thoughts, offering help. The mysterious speaker introduced herself as a tree spirit named Echidna. Meanwhile, Yuri slowly awakens from a blissful nap just as Pina enters her room, fresh from a shower. Helping Pina dry and style her hair, Yuri confides in her about her growing concern for Ein because he hasn't stirred since his last battle, and she fears something might be amiss. Pina, however, reassures her that Ein is most likely just utterly exhausted from all the recent combat. Still, Pina suggests that if Yuri truly wants to cheer him up, she should prepare a sumptuous meal for him when he eventually wakes, as he would surely appreciate the gesture. Convinced by the idea, Yuri agrees, and Pina proposes that they head out together to shop for supplies before Ein regains consciousness. Yuri hesitates, worried that venturing out without Ein might be perilous, but rationalizes that the odds of disaster happening just this one time are slim. At the same time, Ein remains in bed, tormented by a dreadful nightmare. In his dream, he relives his old life as Zoid's pack mule, where he was incessantly mistreated and humiliated, and each slight met with a forced smile as if he were nothing more than a hapless fool. The nightmare escalates as he envisions himself being devoured by hellhounds, a fate he narrowly avoided thanks to meeting Yuri and Ursula. In the midst of the horror, a shadowy manifestation of his own insecurities emerges, taunting him that no matter his efforts, he will never overcome his true nature. Abruptly, Ein jolts awake, screaming from the remnants of his nightmare, and finds Ursula seated by his bed. She gently informs him that he has been asleep far too long and that Yuri and Pina have grown worried. Curious and anxious, Ein asks Ursula about their whereabouts, and she explains that Yuri and Pina have gone out shopping together. This news alarms Ein, as he fears it is unsafe for them to be out alone without protection. Ursula quickly calms him, assuring him that she's monitoring their location in real time and will rush to their aid if needed. For now, she advises Ein to get a bit more rest, recognizing the toll the nightmare has taken on him. As they settle down, Ein recounts the ghastly visions from his dream, confessing that had he not encountered Ursula and Yuri, or had Yuri not convinced Ursula to assist him, he likely would have become monster fodder. Despite surviving by sheer luck, the bitter truth gnaws at him. Deep down, he still feels nothing more than a worthless appraiser. At the same time, Zoid remains in disbelief over Echidna's unexpected proposal. He demands to know if she's truly serious about helping him get revenge on Ein. In response, Echidna reveals the secret of Spirit Ice. explaining that Ain's remarkable strength is not solely due to his own efforts, but largely because he was granted a spirit eye. Outraged by the notion that someone he considers insignificant managed to outshine him simply by receiving a gift, Zoid seethes with envy. Then Echidna makes him an offer he can't refuse. She asks if he'd like to receive his very own spirit eye. And without a moment's hesitation, Zoid eagerly agrees. Seizing the moment, Echidna creates a spirit eye in her hand and forcefully implants it into Zoid's forehead. The excruciating pain is immediate as his body convulses and transforms, and by the time the metamorphosis is complete, Zoid has become a monstrous, powerful creature. Thrilled by his newfound abilities, he leaps into the air to test his agility, dashing effortlessly across the rooftops. Yet his joy is quickly marred when he spots Jolene out with her new boyfriend. Still bitter over her past abandonment, Zoid can't contain his fury, so he pounces and viciously bites the man's head clean off. As he nonchalantly chews on the severed head, he taunts Jolene, mocking her about who the hell she'll turn to for protection now. Horrified, Jolene realizes that the monstrous attacker is none other than Zoid, and she pleads desperately for her life. But Zoid, unmoved by her cries, mercilessly ends her life, tearing her head off as well. Elsewhere in town, as Pina and Yuri stroll down the street, a sudden thunderous crash shatters the calm. Panic ensues as people flee in terror because there's a monster on the loose. In the chaos, Yuri spots a small boy lying injured on the ground. Rushing to his aid, she uses her healing fluid to mend his wounds and urges him to escape to safety. Yet even as she heals the young boy, Yuri resolves that she won't leave until every injured person is cared for, determined to protect those caught in the turmoil. At the same time, Zoid is reveling in his rampage through the city, much to Echidna's amusement. However, she soon grows impatient with his aimless destruction and orders him to target the nearby spirits because if he manages to eliminate them, Ain will lose access to their powers and revert to his weaker self. Thrilled by the prospect, Zoid dashes off to attack the closest spirit, and before he knows it, he finds himself looming right behind Yuri. Just as he's about to land a crushing punch, Pina leaps into action, promptly enclosing Zoid within a barrier and whisking Yuri away to safety. Frustrated, Zoid pounds at the barrier, attempting to break free with raw physical force, but his efforts are in vain. Echidna chimes in, reminding him that such barriers are impervious to ordinary attacks, and that's precisely why she endowed him with a special technique known as anti-spirit arts. Channeling that power, Zoid gathers energy within his body and eventually manages to claw his way through the barrier, shattering it completely. He then soars into the air, intent on pursuing Yuri and Pina once more. When he locates them, he readies himself for another assault. Pina quickly conjures another barrier, but this time, Zoid effortlessly smashes through it. Stunned by his own strength, Pina is left defenseless and terrified because she has no damn way of defending herself now in this shit situation. In a desperate bid to shield her, Yuri steps forward, but instead of protecting Pina, she is seized by Zoid, who seems poised to kill her. At that critical moment, Ain suddenly appears, striking Zoid forcefully and forcing him to release Yuri. Shortly afterward, he and Ursula apologize for their tardiness, and Ain insists that everyone retreat into the safety of his eye since the area is far too dangerous. Once inside, Ain attempts to appraise the monstrous attacker, but his spirit god eyes reveal nothing. A high-level concealment spell shrouds the monster's true details. This prompts Ursula to wonder aloud who could be orchestrating such formidable magic. Zoid then charges at Ain, who parries the onslaught and sends it reeling. Yet when the creature rebounds for another attack, Ain erects a barrier to block it, only to see it shatter just like before. Wounded by the latest blow, Ain is then taunted by the creature, and as its voice rings familiar in his ears, he comes to the chilling realization that the assailant is none other than Zoid. Zoid grins and confirms his identity, boldly proclaiming to Ain that he too has been granted the blessing of a spirit, meaning he's now just as formidable. Ain, taken aback, struggles to fathom how Zoid managed to secure such power, but before he can ponder further, Zoid lands a heavy punch that sends Ain crashing into a wall. Zoid then slashes at him, but Ain dodges swiftly, putting distance between them. Ursula questions why Ain isn't launching an attack in return, but Ain hesitates. Despite Zoid's current form, he remains technically human, and Ain is reluctant to kill one, even if that person is despicable. Suddenly, dark tentacles erupt from the ground as Zoid summons them, forcing Ain to leap onto a nearby rooftop, with Zoid in hot pursuit. Zoid, still in shock over his newfound destructive power, finds it equally baffling that Ain wields comparable might. More than anyone, Zoid is perplexed by the fact that Ain has chosen not to exploit his power for personal vengeance. In his own bitter experience, Zoid had channeled his strength to exact revenge on those who had wronged him, so he is astonished that Ain appears to have done the same to him. Zoid sneers, asserting that Ain has always been nothing more than a pathetic appraiser. No matter how virtuous Ain may try to appear, he must have at least once entertained the thought of rending Zoid's head off in retaliation for years of relentless bullying. Ein tries to protest, but the haunting echo of his own shadow reminds him of all the years he was ridiculed for his trade. It whispers that he and Zoid are cut from the same cloth, both survivors willing to stoop to any level to endure humiliation. And even if Ein has grown stronger, deep down he remains that same wretched human scum. Just as Ein begins to doubt himself, Yuri bursts onto the scene, shouting that Zoid's words are utterly wrong. Ein is the kindest soul anyone has ever encountered, and even if he remains unaware of it himself, Ursula reminds him that his strength isn't solely measured in his abilities, but in the goodness of his heart. Despite the vast power he's accumulated, he has always chosen to use it to aid those in need, never once harming someone weaker, as Zoid has. Ein's compassion and bravery aren't gifts he received from Yuri, they are inherent parts of his varied being. Moreover, it wasn't just Ein who benefited on that fateful day. Yuri's life transformed for the better ever since she met him. Frustrated by all the sentimental praise, Zoid sneers and dismisses Ein as nothing more than a freeloader, someone who leeches off the blessings of spirits. But now his barbs bounce harmlessly off Ein. With quiet honesty, Ein admits that his strength is owed in part to the support of Yuri and Ursula, and that fact fuels his determination to live up to everyone's faith in him. At that moment, an intense energy begins to surge within Ein, dispelling the dark shadow of his insecurities and elevating his power. Having finally embraced his true self, Ein ascends to become an official spirit guardian, unlocking the full potential of his spirit power, 100% at last. This newfound might allows him to anticipate and effortlessly counter Zoid's every move when they clash. Stunned, Zoid can hardly believe how easily Ein parries his assaults, and Ein's expression of calm pity only deepens his frustration. Refusing to be belittled, Zoid lunges once more at Ein. Instead of engaging directly, Ein calmly conjures a barrier and waits. Zoid boasts that such a barrier is worthless, insisting that his anti-spirit arts can simply tear it apart. To his astonishment, however, his attack merely ricochets harmlessly off the magical shield. It becomes apparent that the blessing Zoid received is a mere 10% of his spirit's full power. In contrast, Ein's unleashed potential is complete, rendering Zoid utterly outclassed. Enraged, Zoid shouts for Echidna to bestow him with additional power. Amused by the spectacle, Echidna complies with a slight boost, which only intensifies his mutation even further. Zoid lunges at Ein once more, but this time, Ein is fully prepared. With a swift raise of his sword, he delivers a devastating strike that shatters Zoid's spirit eye completely. In the aftermath, Zoid reverts to his human form and finds Ein standing over him with an outstretched hand. Zoid sees at Ein's persistent, lofty kindness, how he always helps others despite being in his eyes a weakling. Yet Ein believes wholeheartedly that there's nothing wrong with offering help regardless of one's own strength. Having transformed himself into the person he is today, Ein is convinced that Zoid too can change if he dares to take the first step. Finally, Zoid accepts Ein's hand, though the price of his past actions, biting off heads and raising a city, means that he is destined for a long stint in jail. Despite everything, Ein feels a twinge of pity for Zoid, realizing that someone exploited his vulnerabilities to grant him these spirit powers. One can only wonder what ulterior motive the mysterious spirit might have had. Later that night, Echidna returns to the city and collects the fragments of the shattered spirit eye, its recording of the entire fight now granting her access to Ein's battle data. Everything appears to be unfolding according to her plan, save for one detail. Zoid survived the confrontation. Ein's final strike, bolstered by Yuri's cleansing magic, managed to obliterate Zoid's monstrous form without killing him. Now, with the risk that Zoid might eventually reveal his encounter with Echidna, she takes decisive action by sealing his memories. She cannot allow him to interfere with her intricate plans to resurrect the demon lord Mictaren. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.